Butterflies told the story of a woman on the edge of an affair, and not just any woman.
I'd been doing a lot of comedy, and I decided that I'd like to do some more serious work, but I wasn't getting offered serious work because I'd done what were 25 series of silly mums, you know. The thing about Rhea was that she was a dreamer, and she wanted more excitement in her life, and she wanted a bit of romance, which she didn't really get from her husband.
Right, that's lunch finished.
I don't see how the word finished comes into it. You whipped mine away as I was approaching my third chip.
Someone like Wendy Craig was this figure who had been in all these conventional sitcoms in the past, the very traditional suburban domestic sitcoms.
And the idea that she's going to play a woman who's having an illicit affair and is not judged within the script is really revolutionary.
Oh, I'm Leonard, by the way, Leonard Dunn.
Oh, I'm Rhea Parkinson. Mrs. Rhea Parkinson.
How do you do?
I took the idea to the BBC, and the head of comedy went pale and anxious, practically collapsed, when I said I want to write about a woman who has a good marriage, but she falls in love. Well, we can't do that. Oh, no, darling, no. That's for drama.
They first put it out on BBC Two. And then when they realised that people were not shocked and writing to the papers from Godalming or somewhere, they said, OK, let's put it on BBC One, and it was away.
Rhea, these are the 1980s.
Are they? Oh, is there something special about that, then?
It's the age of freedom. The age of not being scared of doing what you want to do.
You can see that Rhea is a character who's responding to the sexual revolution.
You're going too fast.
She feels like she's missing out on something, but she's not fully sure that it is actually sex.
Just another room.
It's quite clear, actually, she still loves her husband, and her husband loves her, and there's lots of episodes where they're attempting to work out how to communicate.
What happened?
The world happened.
So the problem she's got isn't necessarily with Ben, her husband, or with her children. It's that institution of marriage and domesticity that destroys any kind of sexual relationship that most people have. It's marriage that's the problem, not sex.
Much more special.
Rhea wrestled with a dilemma. Should she or shouldn't she?
You want to, don't you?
Yes, I want to.
The first sentence I wrote, I knew they must never go to bed. Not ever. What a shame, how cruel.
We never got to bed, did we? Did we?
No. No. We didn't.
But by now, the cosy world of sitcom was under attack. Old-school innuendo was giving way to something franker, and to a new generation, more honest.
There's an air of complacency about certain forms of comedy, just like there was in music. So the punk revolution came along and changed music, and I think the alternative comedy revolution came along both sides of the Atlantic and changed the nature of comedy.
But by the time it reached television, the attitudes of alternative comedy seemed strangely familiar.
If I'm a virgin, how come I know what a girl's bottom looks like? From looking in the mirror?
The young ones employed cartoon violence and cartoon action that you would never find, as it were, in the good life. It kicked the form around, and it was probably a damn sight ruder.
Missed me, virgin!
But it wasn't... I don't think it was particularly groundbreaking in its treatment of sex.
The Rick Mayall character is about, again, that recurring theme of male sexual frustration. He can never get laid. He doesn't quite understand sex. There's a particular episode of The Young Ones where Jennifer Saunders appears as this character called Helen Back, who's snuck into Rick Mayall's bed, and he believes he may have had sex with her but may not, and he's trying to trade on this in a way which is almost old-fashioned.
At one stage, she even took her bra off.
The need for sex is one of the things that propels them, but the idea that characters who are so, let's be kind and just say flawed, are ever going to find a happy relationship, particularly a sexual relationship with a woman, is kind of... We know that's never going to happen. That's part of what the comedy is.
With everyone at it, comedy writers had to devise situations where they weren't. It had been done brilliantly in the 70s. Could it still be done in the 90s?
Birds of a Feather, you can almost see as the flip side of Porridge. What happens in Porridge is the men are in prison and sex is kind of always on their minds. Birds of the Feather, we find out what was going on while they were in prison.
Just remember how bad I felt when Daryl went away. Yeah, but it's only natural to feel lousy when your old man gets locked up.
Quite often the comedy is between the sort of the respectable upright pair who are waiting for their men and this woman who wants and is going to take.
What made Birds of a Feather nude was the man-mad and married next-door neighbour.
I can't think of any other character, either in a drama or in a sitcom, that was quite so blatantly in your face. I mean, when she sang Like a Virgin, she was in seventh heaven. That was, to her, absolutely glorious. Dorian's attitude towards sex was she took what she wanted when she wanted, and that was fine. She did it on her terms, and she wasn't afraid to put herself out in the marketplace. She just wants men.
Dorian is a surprising character because even though sometimes her sexual relationships go wrong, actually most of the time she's highly successful. She gets the men she wants, she keeps them for as long as she wants them, and she gets rid of them when she wants to get rid of them.
If you saw a man doing that, you wouldn't think twice about it. When you see a woman do it, suddenly she's this new word, she's a cougar.
I need an honest opinion from you. Right. You're an old trollop.
Well, that's how she lived her life. I think she was probably the original cougar.
She is a rare character because she's successful in her pursuit of sex, because she isn't in the first blush of youth, because she isn't an oil painting, but she makes it work for her.
I think Dorian was incredibly liberating, both to herself and for other people. I had letter upon letter upon letter saying, I am just like you, everybody calls me Dorian, or, oh my goodness, I wish I had had the bottle to live my life as Dorian has lived hers. Is that a gun in your pocket, or are you just pleased to see me?
No, it's a gun, actually.
But even in the 90s, sitcom could only go so far. To start with, hardly anything could actually be shown.
I think there was one scene with Chris Ellison where Dorian was actually in bed with somebody, and I think that's as far as you ever got.
And could a promiscuous married woman ever be a happy and fulfilled sitcom character?
There was a vulnerability to her, and that's what made Dorian real, was that it wasn't just about getting the laugh. You saw the hurt behind that.
Don't you ever wish you had kids?
Sometimes. When I need an excuse to see Bambi again.
There was one moment where Sharon said, did you ever want children, Dor? And she said, no, there comes a time in everybody's life when you have to choose children or beige carpets.
I opted for carpets.
So you don't regret it then?
Of course not.
The 90s were full of women behaving badly, as in the fashion PR satire, Absolutely Fabulous.
It was a show that was quite frank about sex. It usually called a spade, but it preferred it if the spade had been, you know, designed by Christian Lacroix.
This is Jeff, he's our dancer, and this is Hilton, drama student, top of the line, cream of the crop.
Fantastic. Hi, Hilton.
There's an episode called Sex, where it feels like a good idea to give a sex party.
You've scored there already.
And they invite two gigolos round, one of whom is played by, although he wasn't at the time, one of the future stars of The Wire.
Has anyone ever told you you look a bit like Sean Connery?
And I seem to remember quite a funny moment when, and this may be of mild historic interest, the first time a sort of, I don't know what they're called, erection stabilizer or something. It was a spray that keeps you hard, and Eddie thinks it's a breath freshener. His tongue becomes essentially stiff for quite a long time, which is useful and not useful.
For all its outrageous behaviour, Ab Fab was a knowing 90s take on the sexual idealism of an earlier age.
Absolutely Fabulous is a sitcom about the consequences of the 1960s. It's the idea of what happened to the swinging 60s, you know, boomers in the 1990s. And we see Adina has been a sexual character. She's lived, she's had ex-husbands, she's got kids, she's been wild, but now, in a way, society's moved on. She slightly can't quite get it, why there's this new conservatism, why there's this new morality, as portrayed by Safi, her daughter.
It's disgusting. That is so degrading to women.
Oh, what do you mean? She's got the whip.
It is a programme you could argue is highly conservative, because what it does is say, look at the ridiculous consequences of the sexual revolution. And so in that way it's kind of quite a reactionary programme in which women who have come from the sexual revolution are actually punished and seen to be ridiculous.
We are sailing.
But for its sexual politics, one comedy famously captured the mood of the 90s like no other.
There's a thing with sitcoms that sometimes they come along exactly as people are thinking about the thing that the sitcom's about.
You know, I have to use the word zeitgeist, I'm afraid. It taps into the zeitgeist.
I think if I'd sat there at my desk in the early 90s and thought, what is really going to sum up the decade, then I would have probably gone in a different direction.
The 1990s was a time when we were almost self-consciously grown up, and it was inevitable that in comedic terms we would have to have a reaction against that. And the women had been, so it was the men's turn, and the men all pretended to be lads.
Dorothy, I've got my flap open and I'm begging you to let me enter.
It certainly, you know, put its finger on something of the way men were behaving, and it contributed to it. I mean, you know, the characters in it became icons of that lad culture, and they, you know, in turn fed into it and it affected the way people behaved.
It's about men trying to cope with that early 90s post-feminist women who are in charge of their careers and who, frankly, don't particularly need the men in their lives. As the series progresses, that becomes more and more farcical, so you get more and more laddish. Boobs, birds, beer, that sort of thing.
If women could only have either buttocks or breasts, what would you sacrifice?
I'd be very sad to lose my buttocks.
No. I know you would, mate, yeah.
Can I have one of each?
We were given pretty much a free hand by the BBC, actually, to be as rude as we wanted to be.
I'm a wanker, and I just need good luck and bloody well should. I'm a wanker.
But one infamous episode on Christmas Day attracted more complaints than any other sitcom of the age.
Wank, wankety wank.
It was an episode in which Dorothy wanted to have children finally, and she'd given up on finding other men, and so she asked Gary if he would...
Fertilise me, Gary. Fertilise me like you've never fertilised me before.
Of course, when it came down to it, he didn't like the pressure, so he ended up trying to... I can't remember, it's such a long time ago. It was an attempt by Gary to boost his sex driver thing, and he used pornography. Lots of sticky tissues was the nub of the problem, particularly sticky tissues stuck to Dorothy's face. Understandably, people thought, I don't know if I want to see that when I'm surrounded by my loved ones. But do you know what? I don't care. I think it happens, and therefore we should show it.
And it was interesting because the response that was that came from the regulators and from the BBC precisely said, perhaps this was a wrong thing to broadcast at Christmas. That they kind of said this was the perfectly appropriate thing for men behaving badly to do, but at Christmas, which has an assumption about familyness, then that's not the right place to put it.
I don't know how we took that long to really deal with the subject of masturbation, because frankly, you know, it's very central to young men's lives, and therefore it was remiss of us to wait until Christmas 1999 to do it.
You got a light, Tony?
Oh, not that drawer, you can't...
If we broke any ground, it was in dealing with the delicate relationship between a mainstream audience and the subject matter. We dealt with pornography in an earlier episode, and Tony has a girlfriend, which is quite rare for him, and he who discovers that he's got a drawer full of pornography. And he does, for him, a quite articulate sort of defence.
Well, what's she got that I haven't?
Oh, nothing. It's just that
Well, she folds up into a nice handy size and sits quietly in the drawer.
And his girlfriend, understandably, just said, no, it's a sort of it's a deal breaker. I don't think you should be reading these things.
Does that really turn you on?
How can that possibly... Oh, yeah, it does, actually.
How can it?